Today, Celona, the founder of Cluster. It's a new on demand social platform backed by investors and advisors that include people like Robbie Gold, actor Tay Diggs, film and television producers Chris Bender, and a screenwriter and television producer Tim King. They basically empower millennials and Gen Z to create, share, and scale the causes that matter to them the most. And you can find the Instagram handle at Cluster for Change. With all that stuff out of the way, it's time to let you hear from Celona himself. Celona, please tell the world, who are you?
Hi. Well, like long walks on the beach. No, I'm just kidding. That terrible, terrible kind of intro that you always get on dating apps and people trying to be funny. I'm not funny. No. I think so. First and foremost, thank you for taking the time. Honestly, I think a lot of what our mission has really been defined by and has kind of matured into is just centered around the fact that people are powerful, and I don't think most people realize just how powerful they are. And let me make it even super tactile for you. If you take a selfie and you post that selfie out, let's say you get 100 followers, you get 10 engagements, and you're like, okay, cool. But then that same action, take a selfie and maybe you hold a kitten you just rescued, or your mom or your family member, something very human, and the same activity basically happens. You post it out to your friends and you see like a 10x and like 5 new followers and better performance and more comments. And what you realize is that social functionally is social, but we need and kind of seek human. We seek human interactions, we seek positivity, but we want real things. And the irony of digital media is that it's kind of extracted the human from a lot of that behavior and from a lot of what we get from that, right? It's these platforms are very insulary in nature, but each person has functionally built their own micro publishing platform. And so what Cluster really looks to do is say, wait a minute, there's first and foremost, if everyone is powerful, which you are, and a lot of us really enjoy giving back because the feeling inside is quite powerful. Like when you help someone, you feel better about yourself. I'm like, well, what if there was a platform that allowed you to simplify giving back, utilize your existing digital platform as an echo chamber for the things you care about most? It could be giving blood. It could be dropping off food to your neighbor who's scared about going out for COVID. Like all of those things count in our generation's take on giving back. And then what if all of that, as you got better engagement, more reach, allowed you to be discovered and then eventually turn that thing into something more, potentially an opportunity, a future, an income? Like to me, that idea is intoxicating. Like it gets people out of their Ubers, out of their houses, PPE'd up or digitally, and interacting again and interacting around subject matters that are bigger than themselves, right? Like we're not saying go out and you can go date, you can meet people who are like-minded based around the subject matters you guys care about, right? Animals, environment, community, food insecurity. The
That's
list goes.
huge. No, that's huge.
But I think we as a group, as a country, can start to come together. We don't need some foreign enemy. Like we've got lots of issues, like back in LA, right, where I live, where you live. It's homelessness is a major
Oh
problem.
man, yeah.
And think about this. Ready? Two people of diametrically opposed backgrounds, let's say left and right. Okay, uh, go and actually help a family that's food insecure, and they drop the food off and they help that family slowly get back on its feet. Well, what happens is suddenly it gives a whole new, like a paradigm shift or a new perspective on who we are as comrades, as countrymen, countrywomen, as people trying to help. And it's funny because that whole idea of left or right kind of melts away when the human is front and center. And when that human is in need, or that animal or that mission that's bigger than yourself is directly in front of you, that's the moment where you go, wow, maybe I'm being a little egotistical. Maybe this is maybe I'm very lucky to be able to walk and breathe and like help people and like see my family when I can.
I
And
mean, that's big. Is it like this is like such a powerful mission? It's not something that you just dream up and say this is what I want to do. There has to be some driving force. Is there something that like in your own life that really drove this forward where you said that's it. This is what I want to do. I want to be socially impactful with my money because the opposite is true for most people. But for whatever reason, you have such a strong sense of mission. Is there something driving that in the past before starting this company?
yeah, I think a couple things, right? The best part about us, group, all of us, is that people don't know what they don't know. right? Like you go back 1,000 years and say, guess what? In this, in the 60s, 70s, we'll be on the moon. That thing right there. They'd be like, yeah, right. How? And I use that ridiculous metaphor, right? But like, the irony here is like people don't know that the mindset of saying, you know what, it's okay to be selfish about giving back. It is. When I grew up in Connecticut, I was a volunteer firefighter. And why did I do that? Well, one, it's awesome. You get a blinky light, you get to drive fast. Car fires are terrifying, but it's fun to like help, right? But the payoff for me, I remember really the first time I felt it was like, there was a car fire and I was the first responder. So I show up in this bright yellow car, blinky lights, and I throw on my, my bunkers, my jacket, helmet, and I have a stupid little small fire extinguisher. It's micro fire extinguisher. It's not big enough. The car fire, the engine's on fire. So I'm like walking up to it and the person's face, I remember like, he was so panicked and he sees me and he's like, oh, thank God. And I had this rush of awesome. And I was like, whoa, I'm getting sales goosebumps. I'll explain them later. My body reacts when there's a really good idea or a true feeling. And I was like, wow, like that. And I'm like, and I use a fire extinguisher. I put out like this much of the fire and I'm out of fire extinguisher. And I was like, sir, it's going to be okay. Not worry about this car being on fire. The engine's going to be right. And my buddy showed up and we put it out. Obviously with the car fire, the car's going to be lost anyways. But like, it was that split second of that human connection of two strangers seeing me. He didn't know who I was. It was a form I represented. And I was like, wow, that felt awesome. And that was really the start of that kind of journey, was that I don't think most people realize how much fun it is to be selfish about giving back. Because if we all thought this way, if we all thought about like, why do you hold the door? Are you a doormat? No. I love holding doors because it forces a smile out of someone's face. I'm like going to force eye contact and be like, you know what? I did that for you. That door is held because of me and joy. Get out there. Have a great day. Right? Like you are in control of inspiring people to do something more. And that kind of genesis, the idea of that never really left. And I think most people have that. It's like a very American thing, right? Like we're big, we are multicultural, multi-domination. Like we have all sorts of every flavor you can imagine, all 31 plus more, in case there's any brand infringements there. We've got all of these amazing people, all of these cultures here. But the throughput is that we believe in liberty, we believe in our rights, and we like to help each other, because the dream is about lending a helping hand, right? It's why Thanksgiving is such an interesting time of the year, because one, apart from the cultural appropriation part, everyone comes out for like turkey trots. They come out to give food. They come out help. The core idea of it is actually very beautiful. And so for me, like, as I went through my journeys, I kind of have always been at the right place and then prepared for the right time, right? And that's a weird kind of nuance, in that you just need to be confident enough to fail. If you're confident enough to fail, you can do anything in the world. Mm-hmm. And for entrepreneurs and people who love to be in startups, that becomes a dual-edged sword, because confidence is not ego. There's a big difference between the two. Ego is, I need you to like me. Confidence is, I like myself. And, the confidence that you bring to the table is one that inspires others to be confident, because they're like, well, why is that person so comfortable in their skin? You're like, I don't know. I've been through a lot. I'm like, I've seen ups and downs, and I know who I am, and I like who I am. And now I want others to like who they are. And then, it really, the culmination of the last couple of years, when, being at Vimeo and watching that platform thrive and succeed, then moving into the influencer space after a couple of really interesting companies, and watching influencers really mature over the last 10 years has been kind of fun, because it started where people didn't know what influencers were. They're like, well, you pay people to talk about brands. And we're like, oh yeah. And we do it all through engagement. And then next thing you know, my little company was like owning 40% of the space, and we got recognized by Deloitte in 2019 or 2016. And it was this wild ride that we weren't ready for, right? Again, there's a flywheel effect, which we'll talk about, that you need to be prepared for. And then with that, and listening to all of these influencers, and at that point, I think our network was like between 35 and 50,000 influencers. I'd always ask them like, well, what is it that drives you? And then it was right down the middle. They're like, well, I want to either, change the world, or I want to get paid. And you're like, that's not great for brand authenticity, but like, let's go down that rabbit hole. Let's just keep the I'm going to get paid part there, and the other part here. And what I realized was that probably 90% of the influencers and celebrities I've talked to, and obviously you can get in my background at a later point, but living in Los Angeles, you meet a lot of people.
Sure.
Being married to my wife is in the industry, so we operate with a lot of different folks who are entertainers, right? And just by being at Equinox or anywhere you go, you meet more people.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny because everyone I talked to was like, I wish I could find a way to give back. And the culmination of that is, 5 years ago, I was on vacation with my wife, and we love traveling because like there's nothing better than meeting a new person who was like totally different than you culturally, from a thought process, their food, like their practices, like all those things are so interesting because you learn about yourself. You're like, I don't know if I like that kind of food. You try it and you're like, I do like that kind of food. Wow, I've gone XYZ years not trying that. All I want to do is know, where do I buy this in LA? And so like, I remember sitting there and I was talking to Lindsay, she's my beautiful wife, and we're like looking out the window, and it's the weird time between lunch and dinner. And I'm like, I just want to go like meet locals. I want to meet locals. I want to give back, and I want to be immersed in their culture. And she was like, whoa, that'd be cool. I'm like, yeah, wouldn't it? I'm like, I've seen a lot of the stuff that's here, and I just want to learn. Like, I really want to experience something more meaningful, right? Because like, as I mentioned before, my life is digital. So just because you see the Eiffel Tower doesn't mean you've seen the Eiffel Tower. And when you go into different countries, like there's so many beautiful nuances that like a local can show you that you never would have known. And so I was like, why can't there be this like on-demand volunteer platform, like an Uber for volunteering? And she's like, I don't know. And then, obviously dinner and all the rest of the fun parts about vacation happened. But I got kind of stuck on this idea, and it became an obsession, one that actually I put so much of my money into. We live in a condo, not a house. Which is like one of those things you never hear about. And like, they're like, that person's killing it. You're like, yep, best thing ever, HOAs. That's a joke. You don't want an HOA. You can explain that at a later point. But like, it's one of those things where when you believe in a mission, you've got to go for it. You have to, because if you don't, you're going to live with regret. And the best part is if you knock it out of the park, even get close, it's a story you can stand behind. And it's one that others will be inspired by. Like, inspiring people don't just happen. They just do the things they love, and they do the things they believe in, and it becomes second nature. And it's like, I don't think I'm anything special. I'm just a normal guy that wants to save the world, right? And I happen to have Jon Snow hair and a big personality, so that all works into my personal brand. That's a joke. But like, I think most people want to do that too. And Cluster's really about saying, what is it you care about? What is it your community cares about? Well, let's activate some change. And we do it in a really fun, gamified way. And we're very lucky to say, like, no one's really solving the problem the way that we've looked at it.
That's kind of cool, man. So there's literally like the way Craigslist works. Here's a job ad, but it's like volunteer opportunities that really match. Do you match people with their, like, can you talk about it? I know you just launched it, so I don't know what you can and can't talk about on the app.
We're public. We're in the app store, but I'm not spending $1 in advertising. I'm actually trying to throttle back the talent from using it, because we're still learning. Because look, our responsibility at Cluster is to use your digital footprint and help you use your data in a real-time fashion to be more influential, to bring like the light of day to every corner of this beautiful country, right? And we can do that. But part of doing that is about saying, we're a peer-to-peer network, right? So I'm like, you can jump on in the next few months and see all sorts of traditional nonprofits, right? We're very lucky to have been able to partner with like the city of San Antonio. We're talking through with Volunteer Match. We've got, obviously, our first client is Aspiration Bank, which is the advertising model, which we'll talk about. But it's like, for us, it's like, I want to allow every person who's out there who wants to go out and say, you know what? I live in a small town. Like right now, I'm in Houston. I want to go out and I want to clean up. There's a river right down the street, a waterway that I noticed a lot of trash on. I want to go clean that up. And I just want to document it. So I'm going to drop a cluster and say, hey guys, Saturday after Thanksgiving, when I'm feeling, full, I'm going to go and like walk a couple of miles, grab, a bunch of recyclable bags, and I'm going to go pick this up. If you want to come with me, let's go be socially distanced, PPE'd, cleaning up.
Wow, that's cool.
And that's what Cluster's about. And you know what? If I'm good at it, which maybe I am, maybe I'm not, what Cluster recognizes is your engagement. It starts to look at you in terms of your persona, the bucket of interests that you care about. And it starts to amass that and start making recommendations for you, for your friends, for content. It starts allowing you that if your engagement is there, let's say you've got 300 followers, like your average person, and you go out and you do a dog walk, for animals that have been thrown aside by COVID, right? People can't afford their animals anymore. And you've gone out and you've walked like 15 dogs and it's a ridiculous nightmare situation, but you've documented it and it's a beautiful story. Like that may activate 150 engagements out of your 300 followers. That's a 50% engagement rate. Like we look at that like, whoa, that person is special to his or her community, right? And if you look at us at scale, we are so powerful. It's not herding cats, as people refer to all of us, right? Because we're all so different. But it's about saying, look, the things we care about most, the things that most affect our communities can truly affect those communities and can become interesting sources of potential future opportunities as long as we're good and do what we say we're going to do, which is like perform your task, document your task, use Cluster and have fun because it syncs up all of your social to allow simple publishing out in real time and communication, right? Because right now, volunteers are like, well, I want to go volunteer. And I'm not going to make fun of platforms here, but each platform has a bias to it. And just do some binging or Googling, depending on who you are. Bing was once a client, which is why I always throw them in there.
Nice. And they deserve to be known. They deserve to be known.
The market share, that counts. It's not great, but they're still a great platform. Yeah, so it's in essence, it's about using your footprint and your kind of community so that as you guys kind of go out and start doing things, you can start to get recognized. You can start to move other people to action, but it's also gamified so that you can actually start to meet new people. Because there's this, living through a pandemic is something I've never done, right? Very few Americans have, and I hate to say it, but the virus is targeting the ones that have. Like our source of truth on this pandemic is now being wiped out by the pandemic itself. It's completely unfair. But when you think about it, like we're all being separated, right? I'm originally from the Northeast, Connecticut, and then I was born in New York and lived in New York. And like the irony there is that like New York is a ghost town in some ways, right? Like it's a shadow of what it used to be because half of my friends have left. They've gone to small towns and they're like, well, what do I do now? My kids aren't in school. Now I've either rented a house or I bought a house. I'm in a community that I don't know, but I want to do something because now I've been cooped up forever and I want to affect something positive. It's time to heal. And that's where Cluster really kind of steps in and says, hey, look, what is it you care about? Honestly, go do it.
So now that Cluster is out and you know this is only the beginning of the launch, obviously. Are there any challenges you faced along the way that have come up that you didn't expect, and have you been able to overcome them, or are you looking to have the solution still come to you? Where does Cluster still stand now?
Challenges.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. There's millions, especially with something like this.
Instantaneous migraine. I'm like, oh my. I'm just kidding.
Don't shoot the messenger.
No. And I'm just crossing my arms because I'm like, let me change my position and think about it for a second because like there's opportunities to look at any challenge. And my biggest character flaw is the fact that I often seen challenge and I see pain as opportunity, right? Like when I was growing up, as we joked about earlier, you know, I was 5'3", and like now I'm 11, and like part of being the short guy is like, you know, you're just very aware of like, I have to bring value. I always have to be bringing value. Like, and that's held true. Like that's like straight up in my DNA.
You can't rest on your laurels.
No, man, like, nobody walks up to you. You're like not getting anything more than like a handshake. Oh, hi.
I'm 5'7". I know what time it is.
That's a perfect height. But all the shoes fit you. But I think like,
you know what Tinder says, and no one if you're not 6 foot tall, I don't want to talk to you.
I mean, 6 foot's pretty tall. I love the fact that we have so many different heights and so many different people because like you actually can end up having a group of friends that have, all their different heights as I've had different masses, muscular, small, skinny, tall. And when they all talk about stuff, it's really funny because it's irrelevant to them. And it makes you realize that like the things that we think hold us back, when you really get into it, are irrelevant to other people.
And you feel the same way about what's happening with Cluster right now?
That's the irony. And so like when we start talking about like a lot of the struggles we've gone through, I mean, man, like I'm getting sales goosebumps again because like, you know, we rolled into COVID with like some investors lined up, ready to go. I had my engineers there. My CTO is rocking and rolling. And COVID economy collapses and it's like funding's gone.
Oh.
They're sitting there and it's like 3 a.m. My wife is pregnant with my new daughter who just showed up, 12 weeks ago. And I'm like, holy crap. And I flashed back to my dad when he'd gone through these types of exercises back when he was alive. I lost my dad in my 20s, and I remember being like, you know what? What's the journey like? What's the story? And I was like, oh, I was like, even if the money isn't there, I'm like, I got to go for it. I have to. I'm like, I've gone so far and I've invested so much. I'm like, no way. Next day I called CTO and the engineers. I'm like, guys, we're doubling down. They're like, we got funding. I'm like, not exactly, but we'll get there. And then I remember, we were very lucky to meet an amazing family office, and their office here in San Diego called Tallypot, and they are just an amazing international family office who got behind us and was like, you know what, we like where your head's at. Your mission aligns with our mission, right? We want to empower people and bring people up. And they spent a few months of due diligence. They were actually the first people to get in my data room at length. And they came out, and we came out as their first ever pre-launch investment in the middle of a pandemic, never ever meeting my investor, but feeling the same kind of kinship over virtual, right? He's just an amazing person. Like, while my wife was pregnant, while went back to school, I took a bit off a little too much. And it was there, and it was this like euphoric moment that, like, oftentimes people talk about struggles and they talk about the finish line. I don't think you should think that way. For me, it's about consistent paradigm shifts. Like, you got to think of it, it's a football analogy, American football, which is a touchdown. The second you score, you got to get part of your team off the field and get right the heck back on and be ready to run it all the way back. You have to be thinking that way as an entrepreneur. It's overwhelming if you don't, because if you let yourself rest too long in each success, and trust me, it feels so awesome to get a win. You're like, oh my God, yes. It's just, you can't, because you'll end up distracted. And then the downs, and that's the real part, the struggles of it are like the consistent, like managing people, but really setting people up for success. The allowing people to, when you set them up for success, thrive and own the business units that you're giving them. These are all things that are learned. So, like, as you're going out there, and you're trying, you have an idea of what's perfect. Honestly, like, B+ students build billion-dollar companies, because they'll do the work, and they'll do enough of the work so that if you give notes at the end, or there's some tweaking to be done, that's just, that's the sprint. Like, that's the evolution of your product. And they don't get married by either to the merit of what you're doing, just the merit, or it being perfect, because in the internet, nothing is perfect. It's not. And your users, as they amass, will tell you everything you want to know about your product. And if you're like us and you're pioneering this kind of social impact and social impact marketing space, for us, the biggest problem has been helping people understand that, like, volunteers need to get paid in our generation. Like, we are not our parents. We will not buy a house for 50 grand and sell it for $1 million. That's not in our cards. Like, we don't have, like, fresh out of college, going to make $1 million a year, 100 grand, 200 grand. No, that didn't happen for us. Like, we have the opportunity now, though, to be part-time students, right? To be part-time employees, to go to, to be part-time travelers, to, like, self-discover and learn from our parents and learn from their mistakes in a way that maybe the financial upside won't be the same, but our potential for individual growth is exponential, right? And that is so cool, because it's an untapped resource as of right now, right? It's not just about likes and comments or making fun dance videos or making, like, a video that's going to disappear in 30 minutes. See what I did there? But it's about using those in their aggregate to start to allow your story, and potentially your story of empowerment, to really be told. And then, more importantly, create these unique feedback loops so you can start to build out and potentially become the social impact influencer of tomorrow. But you don't need to be Charlie with 100 million followers. Like, you can affect local change and actually know your followers, right? And I think, like, all those pieces, I didn't really answer your exact question because there's a million problems we had.
Sure.
Like, the barn was on fire and I'm like, with, like, a cup of water. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be a problem. But
No, I think it's cool that the way you're looking at problems. You said, of course, we have, like any other business, right? You had to deal with the fiscal issues, whether it's raising the money, how much of it, whatever, right? Talking to keeping investors happy while all this is happening, and making sure that they feel confident about what's going on all throughout as the news continues to pour in. There's a lockdown here. There's this. There's that. Right? When your platform is essentially inspiring people to not only make social impacts, but also you're getting. It's ironic. You're making social media the do what it's what it should have done from the beginning, which was make people social. But what it did was it drove people apart. Now, through causes that people believe in, you're bringing them together. So I actually like how much emphasis you're putting on your mission and not so much on like, yeah, we raised this much money. Because how often do you hear a story where the whole conversation really is about how much money was raised? And while that's cool, there's no shortage of information on how money was raised, right? There's always somebody who talked to somebody and they were able to get it down just in the nick of time. But what you're doing is you're trying to tell a different story. And I think that's what's going to make this so great is you're saying, look, we know what it's like to raise money, but you know what we don't know? What it's like to develop your mission so clearly that you're able to leverage as much opportunity as possible in a way that creates even more opportunity. As we said when we first started talking, opportunity begets opportunity.
And
So
that's very
as you continue to grow, it's only going to continue to grow the opportunities available on this platform.
well. I think what you just touched on though about like the idea of being open to opportunity and how it really they do beget each other, right? What was it, Thomas Jefferson who said like, the harder I work, the luckier I find I am, something like that.
Yeah.
There's some truth there, but it's like it's also about working really smart, right? Like I always everyone knows like I talk about dyslexia and ADHD because we should. There's no
Yeah.
like there's not a paywall between me and you. Maybe there is. I don't know where this is going to live. Hopefully not, because we want it to be attainable. Cluster is free. Shameless humble brag there. But no, I think like when I think about being ready for opportunity, it's about just owning kind of who you are and being like, look, I'm going to be bombastic at times. I'm going to write grammatical errors because I don't see it because I'm dyslexic. But like, if you buy into what I'm trying to do and how we're trying to do it, what happens is like all of my investors, all of my clients, all of our talent, all of my engineers, they buy into the idea of what they're trying to do, right? And we're lucky because like our idea is like, I want to be the home for good. Like I want to empower millions of Americans. I want to save lives. I want to get us talking again. Like that's a cool mission. And we're very lucky to be that company. 5 years of me struggling through blood, sweat, and tears to get here, but we're here now. But I think for a lot of companies that don't have that kind of a vision and a mission, it's like, you've got to find a way for people to buy in and feel a sense of ownership in what it is you're trying to do, right? So if you're creating your widget or you're creating a product that X, Y, and Z new water company, well, what is it about X, Y, and Z new water company that's going to make the team feel so special, feel so bought in, put the hours in, because you can't ask someone to work extra hard, right? You can ask someone to believe in a mission. If that mission is something that moves them, then you've got a person that's a future general, right? Because every single teammate, every employee, every senior leadership, they're all generals. Great ideas come from anywhere, right? And I think if you can start to look at your team as whether you've got a co-founder or you've got a core founding team or whatever, of like, what is it they love most, getting to know like in the weeds of what it is they think they can bring to the table on top of what they're doing, let them try it. Like the worst case is they're going to fail. So that was something I meant to bring up before, because I have been like, honestly, completely impressed at my team at Cluster. Like they have all risen so far above what the original expectation was from each of them, that when I mentioned like, turning soldiers into generals, it happens when you give people space to thrive and say, dude, make mistakes. Just don't make the same mistake.
Mm. I like that. And I was going to ask you, how do you go about keeping your team inspired during this time? But it's kind of like Seth Godin with the Purple Cow, where the actual design of the idea itself has the inspiration there, and that really is what makes your company stand out. Not only the fact that you guys have a platform that's so different, but your team actually has buy-in without you having to convince them to do otherwise, which is something that a lot of companies struggle with. They talk about how do you develop company culture or et cetera. You're like, what do you mean? Our whole design is culture.
What's funny? So we have lots of ethos that we follow, right? And we're a newer company for a lot of my teammates, but for me, so my core team was like, obviously I came up with the idea and built it, but I was very, very lucky that though I did lose my father very young, my father actually recruited our CTO out of the CIA at the end of the Cold War. And
Wow.
that our CTO currently at Cluster is my uncle Stuart. And he was my father's business partner for, oh God, 15, 20 years together. And they did awesome things. They had catastrophic failures. They had wild success. And what's funny is when I have my calls with him and we reflect on everything, it's like having a vision in my father's life, like through his eyes. And always so interesting when I say something or I'll do something and after he'll call me like, oh, your dad used to do that. Did you know that? And I'm like, no, I didn't. Is it a good trade or a bad trade? He's like, men's and men's. He's like, it's a good trade. Maybe fix this part. And I'm like, okay. And what I'm getting at here is not everyone has their family associated, right? Like not always. I'm big on working with friends because it sucks when it doesn't work out, but it's so much better when it does work out. People say, don't make it personal. I'm like, dude, everything's personal. Honestly, I take everything personally. I don't care what anyone says. I try really hard to not let it hurt me or affect me, but like business and life is personal. Like my mission's personal, but my point is, original point is that, managers make all the difference, right? Like I was really lucky that, early in my career, when I was in my late teens, turning 20, I had a really highly reviewed automotive website that got me discovered. And that's how I got into technology, right? Like I was a street racer in New York. And like, literally, I didn't tell you that before, but like, yeah, I used to race cars. And don't do that, kids. Like, don't do as I do as I say. Just kidding. Have lots of fun, but do it on the racetrack. At the time, this was the 90s, before Fast and Furious. It was a very unique place. We did it off.
You were Fast and the Furious before Fast and the Furious.
Too fast, too furious. Oh, that was the second one. It wasn't as good as the first. That wasn't even fun. But I've never really said that joke that way. It's funny. Anyway, but more of my story. The guy who basically brought me in, it was the CEO. His name was Gus Conradis, and the other guy was Wayne Clough. And Gus was the CEO of Wrenchhead that later became eBay Motors. They got bought by eBay, and they were an e-commerce site that became a catalog. And he was just so open about listening to my ideas. And I'm like, the CEO of this company, I'm like a 20-year-old kid going to school at nights. I'm like, why is he listening to me? I'm like, and it was just so interesting because I'd be like, hey guys, look, I did control 2 groups of product. I controlled sport compact and accessories. And we did grow those exponentially, but like, he would be so open to ideas and I'd watch him manage like, wow, this guy is like, he's just like a cool dude, shows up on a motorcycle, brings everyone in, doesn't care about your background. And he was like one of those people who, while he was alive, he passed about a year and a half after he was by car, riding a motorcycle, ironically. And he was just one of those people that really helped galvanize like who was it and how was it I wanted to manage, though I wasn't ready yet, right? Now I'm a much better manager than I was even 2 years ago. But I think a lot of corporations that I've either talked to or advised, it's like the problem with their culture oftentimes is in micromanagement. It's always like people want to get in the weeds of stuff and it needs to be perfect, like that joke of TPS reports. And you're like, clearly I'm not the guy that works corporate America. I have to get a haircut. That's a joke. But it's interesting because a lot of micromanagers suck the life out of not ideation, but culture. Because people don't feel like they can be comfortable, right? They go out for drinks after the fact and they're like, Michelob Ultra, please. And you're drinking it. And it's like that awkwardness of like going out to drinks with people you don't really want to be around versus being like, hey, you know what? So yeah, I'm the CEO of the company and I don't have all the answers, but I have the drive and I have the patience to get us there. And that's a lot for a Sicilian American to say about the patience part, but like, it's a work in progress. And like, when people realize that's where you're going and that's what you're aspiring to be, you start to cut each other slack. And it's not like, I don't want to hang a single team member out to dry. Like I want them to, I want them to make new mistakes. And when we make mistakes, and trust me, we make lots of mistakes. We're trying to be like, okay, well, how do we fix that? Oh, I think this is where it comes from. And I'm like, wow, it's a great idea, dude. Yeah, that's the idea. Put that in sprint 6, right? And I think it's been really important for us. And what I'm hoping we can do here is really start to model out like how you take a startup, like in a pandemic, like we had everything against us to raise money. And somehow we were able to keep doing it by like never stopping and like just keep grinding. But at the same time, I want to make one last point on this, which is this culture of like celebrating the overworked person has got to stop. It has got to stop because for every single man and woman who wants to go build their own company out there, do not be a lone wolf. Don't take everything on your shoulders. You're going to have to do that in the beginning, but like once you start to establish and you get your first person, your first intern, you've got to find a way to decompress, to make yourself the best person so that you can continue to grow. Because the one thing you don't want to be is a taskmaster. Like a lot of CEOs I know and startups that are actually like Series B and in process of potentially getting acquired, they're just taskmasters. And they have no free time. They're overworked. And then they get to that burnout wall and then they go on vacation and then they start all over again. Like it's Groundhog's Day. And from my perspective, I'm like, look, the culture of celebrating the overworked, that doesn't work. Like, just because you can pull more hours than the normal person, that's not good for you. And that's not good for what normal people who maybe can't, right? Maybe they have kids, maybe they have responsibilities, maybe they're in school, maybe they've got, other disabilities that prevent them from working that hard. Like, we should celebrate performance and aptitude and want to have aptitude, because those are things that we all have, right? Those are things that we all can do. And it's not a derivative of like, I work harder than you, therefore I get more. It's, I can work smart, I can work efficiently, and I can get most of what you did and still have time for my kids, right? I'm a new dad, and still have time for my wife to work on my relationship, because life is a relationship and it's about building, and to go back to school if I want to, or like I've done here, I've come down to Texas for the next couple of months to take care of my sick father-in-law. This is my big volunteer activity, is enriching his life as he's moving into the final stages of it.
That's huge, man. I mean, you live your values and it shows. And I can see why this company has a lot of potential for success and has already achieved so much just being a company that was born during a pandemic and is flourishing. So there's a lot of achievements there. I guess the next question is like, where are you guys going next? Is there a second phase to this launch? I mean, you might be in phase 10, but as far as publicly, we're probably only phase 2 yet. Is there something where you have plans to go?
Yeah, we're in beta, honestly, because look, for what we're endeavoring upon, you can do A/B testing, you can do focus groups, you can do betas all day, every day, and they're going to tell you a perspective, sometimes a biased because of sample size, perspective of what you're trying to do. We launched our company saying, you know what? We were very lucky that the city of San Antonio was like, hey, we want cool tech companies. And I'm like, you guys are awesome. Because to me, San Antonio is way more than just the City Walk and the Alamo. It's an impassioned city. It's a diverse city. It's just a multicultural city. Oh God, there's so much to do in that city. And for them to open up, really just like want to partner with us and say like, let's talk about the food bank. Let's talk about the sports teams. Let's talk about, the holidays and how we can move the needle. It was just kind of amazing. And what we realized was like, let's launch the product and just make mistakes, but let's be very open about it. Like, hey guys, we're a small startup. We're super scrappy and we're comfortable talking about uncomfortable things, because our goal is empowerment and inclusion. And you don't move forward and you don't grow without a little pain. That's just life, right?
Yeah.
And for us, phase 1 will pretty much wrap up at the end of Q1. At the end of Q1, we've hit a level of profitability already. We launched officially on November 12th. Then we got our first client with Aspiration Bank. Thank you, Aspiration Bank, or Aspiration. And I think there's a lot of brands now that as they're starting to learn about this idea of social impact marketing, they're like, wait a minute. So you're telling me I can like work with people, work with a platform, work with celebrities and hit a KPI or ROI and have some brand affinity? And I'm like, yeah, that's our vision for phase 2. Our vision for phase 2 is to say like, wait a minute, what if we could get our country out of their Ubers, out of their Lyfts, and back in their communities?
My apologies.
Oh, thank you, Siri. I'm like, wow.
Even Siri knows it was time to apologize for the way we've been living.
Thank you, Apple. See, not that Apple, lovable Apple. No, I'm just kidding. It basically is like, phase 2 is really about saying, look, I want every single person in our country to be able to go out and help their community. And if they're good at it, our platform, as it evolves, will start to recognize that they're good at it, right? It'll start to understand and create the world's first true blueprint for what the value is of giving back. Right now, there isn't one, right?
The ROI of kindnesses.
Yes. And it's funny because like you think about volunteerism, and our parents were like, I'm going to write a check. And my dad, one thing he always I really loved was he was like, son, the only thing you have is time. So if you're not donating your time, you're not doing your job. And I was like, whoa, and I get goosebumps again, because I've thought about that idea in a while. And it was like, wow, like, holy crap. He was like, in many ways, opposite of a lot of older people. Not that there's any bias there, but like people want to write checks. And like for our generation, that's like not good enough. Like, yeah. One, we don't have the money, but two, like, dude, I want to learn more about you. Like, we're here together for a small amount of time. Like, teach me about your culture. Let's do something together, because the irony about where we're headed is like our tomorrow will not be our parents' yesterday. It can't be, because we're different. We're a different nation. It doesn't mean the core beliefs of America has changed. It's just like we've changed a little bit. Like we've grown up, we're dynamically changing. We're born like digital natives, right? We're interwoven for the first time ever. Everyone's connected more or less, like globally. And it's like, what does that mean when we start to approach problems? And so Cluster assesses those problems and like really wants to say, everyone is powerful. Everyone can start to affect change. And if you're good at it, not only will we create the world's first blueprint for social impact, so that we now know if you're giving blood or you're donating time with an animal, we know what it's worth, right? In a fun, gamified way, right?
Wow.
But we're also going to use your data to empower you. Like, we want to help you monetize your channels. We also want you to be better at being you. Not better photos, more authentic you. And I think that's the difference here. Like, you don't need 75 filters. I mean, with all due respect, one filter is great. Come on. But, like,
You got to keep the cat filter.
oh God, yeah, always. Space alien, cat, unicorn. Those are very, very generationally correct. Myself included in there. But, I think like, there's this opportunity to like really have fun, meet people who care about the same things you care about in a time where everyone feels really isolated and in many ways afraid to speak about what they care about. And I think like, our vision is to really be this inclusive platform that fosters and incubates social movements. And as we start to develop, like I have full intentions of like investing in these social movements as they come up and really looking at them saying, wow, like what you're doing is amazing. Like, do you want to be a 501c3 or a for-profit? Do you want to be the future, do good YouTube channel? Or do you want to be the future person who's like traveling the world, telling stories that haven't been told about indigenous cultures that are being taken advantage of? Like, we just sit at this precipice of change and it's scary. Of course it's scary, it's change. But like, we are so lucky to be at this edge because it's not like the edge of a cliff, it's the edge of one page and one chapter, one time in our history. And when that page turns, it's our turn, right? And it's inclusive. This isn't like we're not taking something away from anyone. We're saying, guys, there's plenty of space, there's plenty of opportunity when what you're tackling is not a fight abroad, but a fight here. It's food insecurity, right? It's looking at animals, it's looking at who we are as a group. It's about racism, it's about challenging the status quo and using our collective voices to drive right down the middle and say, guys, we are united. That is who Cluster is. That is who this country is. And if we're united, then we can talk about anything because we all have the same rights. And as long as those rights don't infringe on another person, have at it. But the second they do, then we got a problem.
It's really cool that you've made business and social media uh, look cool under the guise of actual impactful things like charity and volunteerism and just being socially conscious and globally conscious. I mean, to be able to make that cool and profitable is the trick, right? Most people make it profitable, but they don't make it cool. Some people make it cool, but there's no money there. And even if everyone wanted to volunteer, you can't run a business without cash flow. And you've been able to make that work. So, I mean, honestly, I'm excited. I want to check the platform out myself. And just for a reminder, if people don't know, Cluster for Change on Instagram is where you can find them. Now, is Instagram the main channel you're going to be hovering over, or is there a channel you prefer them to contact you on?
Like we have our LinkedIn, our Instagrams are fine. In the app stores, it's We Are Cluster. The big thing is like grow with us. Like, look, I'm a dad. Like, I'm just a guy who really wants to help. And as I mentioned before, like I've invested a lot in this to start, in the blood, sweat, and tears, as far as outweighs any kind of monetary. But like, help us grow. And the thing is, like, we want to be able to like learn from our users. Like, we're really just starting out, right? But the thing is, like, when I talked about in the beginning of this, that flywheel effect, right, which was all the prep you do and all the pieces that you've put in place start to take on this kind of centrifugal force that really creates that uptick in traffic and awareness, in press, and et cetera. And I think like you have to be prepared for success, but you also have to be prepared for failure within success, right? Like, I always joke about like, I'm probably the most unsuccessful person you've ever met. Cause like I've gone down in flames so many times. And every time I've done that, literally the next day, sometimes a day and a half, I would be like, all right, let's do on to the next thing. Because like There's nothing else I can do there. Like it went down in flames. I'm looking at it. It's terrible. So I'm going to walk that way and keep walking. Right. And the funny part about it was, I was talking to this nice stranger when I had a broken iPhone I had to get fixed, during, actually literally a week ago. And she was very, very nice. And she was like, she's like, I think you work out. And I was like, I used to work out. I used to pay money to lift heavy things. Now I do it for free for my father-in-law. Not the same. I really miss the gym. But, she's like, yeah, she's like, I want to work out too. I'm like, okay. I was like, you can start like today, like one step. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah, like walk around the mall, right? Because I'm here in Houston, the Apple store is in a socially distanced mall. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, just take a step. Like, she's like, well, I probably shouldn't drink that Starbucks coffee. I'm like, not all Starbucks is bad, but that one is maybe one pump. She's like, maybe one pump. And I'm like, how about one lap every day, one pump moving forward? And guess what? In 1 year from now, you've become a new person. In 1 month from now. And her mind was like blown. And I'm like, I'm not that smart, but like, I want everyone to know that like, it doesn't take a lot to become something different, something better. But something better isn't giving up on who you were. It's just saying, you know what? I want to level up. Like I want to become something more because I know I've got X amount of summers left. I know I've got a passion for a subject matter that needs to be told. And now Cluster allows that idea of your subject wants to be told to manifest in either a digital activation or an IRL activation, right? And as we move through COVID into Q2 and Q3 and vaccines start to roll out, there's going to be so many people in need, honestly. Like so many families are being disrupted by this that like kindness is going to be the number one commodity in 2021. And that's the one that we want to be able to service.
That's huge, man. Wow, kindness is going to be the number one commodity. I'm going to remember that. We usually wrap this up by just asking, part of being in business has a lot to do with making introductions or being introduced. So, is there anyone in particular that you would love to meet? Because you never know who's listening, you never know whose ears this lands on. Is there anyone at all you're looking to meet?
Everyone. I mean, like, look, there are people in time, and there's other areas you can look up of historical figures I want to meet. But the more I think about it, everyone, because everyone is special. Like everyone does one thing special and knows one great person at the minimum. Those are table stakes.
Yeah.
Like I built Cluster because I believe in everyone, and I know your potential. Like it's greater than you can imagine. Because like I'm not special, and yet here I am doing special things. Right? That's confidence, not ego. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
Because I've also gone down in flames, which you talked about. But, like, I believe in everyone because like everyone can affect change at a local level. And then if you get really good at it, you can do it at a national level. So like, I want to meet as many people as I can post-COVID, like before I die, because like, there's just so many beautiful souls that are just like, just one step away from not happiness, but fulfillment.
Mm.
You don't have to be happy to be fulfilled. Fulfillment comes when you like do something that is greater than yourself, that makes you feel a sense of self, that becomes yourself.
Are you going to be on your platform, sort of like Tom from MySpace, so that people can get a hold of you?
What's funny? My cousin, so the other person, my head of finance, who I recruited over a long time ago, he was formerly at AIG, is our head of finance. He's my cousin who I've known forever, and I love him. He's like, you should be Tom on the platform. And I was like, dude, first of all, nobody knows what Tom is anymore. And I've heard he's super cool, but like, being Celona out there, like, look, I will be the most accessible person. Like, obviously I've got kids and a wife and a platform we're running. True. We do interviews like this that take time, but like, I want to help. Right. And if you can get me, I'm there. Like, there'll be nothing else on my mind. Right. As outside of my Apple products yelling at me, which you just, but and I think that's the most important piece, because too many people feign engagement through social likes, comments, etc. Like, I yearn for deeper connections, right? I think we all do. And I think, Cluster is designed to do that. And who knows, we may throw into a sprint next time you and I talk, maybe like, hey, guess what? Next 2 months, I'm going to be everyone's friend. But again, that's kind of it's a funny idea. But it's at the same time, whatever we can do to make our users happier, like, we just want you to reach out to us. We have our like support at Cluster is like front and center in the App Store. Like, tell us what you don't like communicate in a concise way, and will listen. Because like it's foolish when people tell and dictate to others like the way they should live or the way they should be happy, because like you don't know my journey. And you know what? I don't know their journey. So like, to put a bow on the idea you just asked me, like I think everyone can open up so many beautiful windows and doors in my personal journey of growth. Where like I just couldn't imagine just one person, right? Because I'd be talking to that one person and then a stranger would walk by, right? Let's just say it was like Abraham Lincoln, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm in this time period. That person's wearing a ridiculous outfit. I gotta find out what's in that hat. Like I wouldn't be able to stop. And so I might as well just be truthful and say it's everyone.
You're a true entrepreneur in the sense that you love the idea of burning to the ground. Not that you love the burning, but that you go, I've burned to the ground, time to keep it moving. That's just so entrepreneurial. And your curiosity, insatiable curiosity for the things that happen around you. I don't see anything but success in store for you, and it's clear that those are the qualities that have driven you forward.
Well, we've got about 24 months of runway right now, so we're really good, like in terms of that. But like I said, we're for what we're endeavoring upon, and there's a phase three we haven't touched on yet, and a phase four. We got to prove out the exact model, right? We've got to perfect the technology, and part of that is my collaboration with our future users, right? We've got a lot of media lined up when we're ready to drop it to make us very talked about. But it's kind of like one of those things where like, when do you throw yourself a party, or does the party just happen when your friends show up? And that's the paradigm of launching a company. It's really like, do you build around the people who love you, or do you force the conversation? And we're big around saying like, let's find the people that love us and talk to them. Let's find the people that like us and let's engage them, right? Because there's nothing better than like having users who are like, what I don't like about that was that function. And then we find out other people didn't like it. And then the next update is gone. And they're like, wait, they listened to me? Because you're like, yeah, man, you're a user. Like we can't listen to everyone because people could say crazy things. But like if there's consensus and it makes sense, well, then why wouldn't you want to leverage the masses?
That makes so much sense, man. I honestly, I would expect us to have a second conversation when phase three and four start opening up. We bring you back on here and, keep the conversation going because I'm actually really excited to see where the future holds for Cluster and for you, Celona, and all the things that you're doing.
Well, we'll see, man. Honestly, I think like if I can leave the listeners with anything, it's like let's be slower to judgment. Let's be slower to, how do you say this? Um, like making each other feel uncomfortable, and be quicker to action with regards to kindness. And meaning like just because someone does something wrong, like we shouldn't throw them out. Just because someone says something wrong, I don't think we should just throw them out. I think we need to start like slowing down life, because so much is happening, right? With the pandemic, with news, with the election, with just everything. Like we need to slow down our responses, because nothing is gained in a knee-jerk reaction ever. Again, Sicilian, I know this. Like it's in my DNA to do that. So I'm like, breathe. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's talk. No, I'm just kidding. But like, it's really important to me that like we start to slow down this kind of cadence of communication, because just because you heard something doesn't mean it's fact. Just because you saw something doesn't mean it's real. Let things become truth, and like let your actions speak louder than your words. And let's join Cluster and make the world a better place.
Man, I couldn't end this episode on a better note.